All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the T1D crew, and we're going to be talking to Nick today. Hi, Nick.
Hi, everybody.
Hey. So I love doing these interviews at least, a few times a year for all of us here in the crew. And Nick and everybody, my goal is in the crew is to provide inspiration and support, education, and community to people with type 1. Those are three things that I think are greatly lacking. The education part for sure, less than 20 to 30% of type 1s can even stay in range on a 70% of the time. So most type 1s are hitting, 200s on a regular basis. Number two is people are really lacking support, I think, and that motivation to, keep going. It's just, I like to equate us to professional athletes, and just like a professional athlete, it's like, you got to keep going to practice to fine tune your skills. So we have these meetings on a regular basis to just kind of touch base and fine tune and stay motivated, which I think is really especially important when we are like a solo in our life. Like, it's not like we're surrounded by our teammates all doing our blood sugars at the same time, right? And then, of course, number three is community. And it's so important to be educated, to be motivated, and to have community, to be reminded that you're not alone. So we have something in the chat. I'm at work just listening today. That's no problem. Anybody can just listen in anytime. So I just want to introduce Nick. Nick is a fellow type 1, and he's written a book that I just love the title of. He takes living with type 1 and really talks about why living with a chronic disease is one of the best things for having an incredible life, right? So Nick, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So where are you calling from? I always like to know where people are calling from.
Yeah, so I am in Cape May, New Jersey right now. My hometown is outside of Baltimore, Maryland, but I have family friends that are here. So I'm spending a little time 2 blocks from the beach. So I can't complain too much.
Oh, that's great. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. And how long have you had type 1?
I've had type 1 since I was 4, and I am 23 now. So
okay.
18
So
years, I believe.
almost at your 20 years. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
All right. All right. Well, so what inspired you to write your book, Nick?
Yeah, well, so my background is in clinical exercise physiology. So that's what I studied in school. And I sort of got into that because of my whole life living with type 1. I was always really interested in health and very in touch with my body and how I was feeling, and just always interested with the human body in general. So
yeah,
that led me into studying that. And throughout college and after college, I did a lot of work in diabetes education, like working with hospitals and working as a camp counselor. And then obviously having type 1 myself, I have been through lots of different doctors and diabetes educators and people who were trying to help me really get a hold on my condition too. So I kind of saw from both sides, being the one that was educated and being the educator, that a lot of the, information and insight that comes from doctors and educators in the type 1 world can be kind of negative. There's not a lot of positive talk, a lot of motivational talk in the world.
Yeah.
And diabetes burnout is a big issue that a lot of people face. And a lot of that can sort of stem from these like deep-rooted beliefs and psychology about how we think about our diabetes. So that always really interested me. And, diabetes burnout wasn't something that I had ever dealt with as a child. And a lot of people around me had. So I always wondered, like, why hadn't I dealt with this? And I kind of realized it was because of this deep-rooted belief and positive mindset that this is a challenge that I want to face and overcome, rather than something that I have to deal with, rather than a big burden on my life. So I kind of took that and wanted to share that with the next generation of people with type 1.
Wonderful. That is great. That is great. It's, everybody has such a unique story, and those early years are so formative, right? And how you first get it. And it sounds like you had really quite a positive path, which is great. So it must have been a combination of the external world around you, but also just who you were, it sounds like.
Totally. I definitely think it's something that was instilled in me. It's the way that my parents are, but also I had a great support system of wonderful doctors and parents and siblings who were there to help me through everything. So yeah.
Well, I do think that we got lucky. I feel the same way. Like I never had my mom, I feel like say, oh, I feel so sorry for you, or like nobody felt bad for me. Like that never even entered my mind.
Right.
It was like, this is what you do now. I'm like, okay, I'm 7. So I'm like, okay, like you're not really like analyzing and critically thinking through things when you're 4 or 7, right? You're like, okay, this is what we do now.
Right. I always say that it's almost, for me, it was almost better being diagnosed earlier on, because that
Yeah.
sort of just became all that I knew, rather
Yeah.
than a massive lifestyle shift, which can obviously be harder.
I totally agree. There's pros and cons to early diagnosis. There's pros and cons to late diagnosis. We have, I feel like half and half are on in the crew in our group here. We have, just as many and so many more are actually being diagnosed as adults now. So that is such a, to me, a clear environmental triggers are on the rise.
Totally. Yep.
Yeah. So, well, for anybody that's, I don't know, we're not going to have time to share everybody's initial story for sure, but, some people had a great initial, 10 years and some people maybe didn't, but I also, if you didn't, that's why you're here, right? You can always change your story. And I'm really passionate about mindset in all of life. I've been passionate about mindset since I was a teenager as well. And so I just want to inspire everybody, because I can hear, like I feel like I had a great, initial diagnosis of just people supporting me. And it sounds like you did too. So anybody that's listening who doesn't feel that same way, I just want to inspire you that know that like anything in life, we can always change our mind. Anything in life. I actually just picked up a book that it's like, it's called The Happiness Trap, How to Choose Being Happy Right Now, or something like that. And I love these books because I'm always dedicated to my happiness, but I also love being able to learn things to, support with all you guys. So, but let's dive a little deeper into your journey. So, share with everybody what the core messages are in your book. Let's kind of, take the next 10 minutes. I'd love to hear, because the title, let me get this exactly right. How a chronic illness can be your strongest motivator for an extraordinary life. And I just love this visual of your cover. I'm just going to share the screen here. I just pulled it off Amazon. So here's his book, Positive to Type 1. I just love it with the pump. How living with a chronic illness can be your most powerful motivator for an extraordinary life. So, yeah.
And a big shout out to another amazing woman with type 1, who is actually my graphic designer who designed that front cover.
Oh,
she has type 1 as well, which was really cool.
Oh, good. Yeah, great. Okay, so yeah, let's pull out why you think that having type 1 is a strongest motivator for extraordinary life. Because so many type 1s are like,
yes, totally. And that was kind of my whole reasoning behind wanting to write the book, is this idea of, before I mentioned the word belief, and there's this concept where our beliefs guide our thoughts, which guide our feelings, which guide our actions, right? So if we can change what those core beliefs are, then we can change the way we think, we can change the way we act. So the whole idea, what I had seen before was a lot of fear surrounding everything. So if your core beliefs are, I'm broken, I'm sick, something is wrong with my body, then the thoughts that come from that are, going to be more depressive, hopeless, things like, why is this happening to me? And then those feelings lead to actions that typically aren't very productive. It's a lot of wallowing in sadness and poor treatment, diabetes, burnout. Where on the other side of things, if we kind of lead with love rather than fear, and that belief that we start with is, I'm facing a challenge right now, and this is really tough, but I know I'm going to grow from this, then the way we feel is going to be very different. It's going to be motivated, hopeful, and our actions are going to be different. We're going to have better treatment because we're thinking differently and we're feeling differently. So that's kind of the whole core idea behind the book, is that everything is rooted in belief. And I just saw so much negative self-talk, so many negative beliefs from so many. I mean, I primarily work with young people with type 1, but just anyone in the type 1 community, there is just a lot of negativity surrounding everything. So I wanted to really put a positive spin on things. And there's also this mindset of, oh, maybe that's toxic positivity, but I like to think of it more as like positive reframing where, you can take something that might be negative and, suffering is a part of human existence. It's okay to feel those emotions and get there, but it's also important to say, okay, what can we learn from this? How can I grow from this? And that was sort of the whole core idea of the book.
I've never heard of toxic positivity. I don't even want to hear about it. Like, that's a thing.
Yeah, it is a thing, unfortunately.
I think that sounds like people that are committed to being negative.
Right. Exactly. I'm on the same page.
I'm like, what? That's crazy. I couldn't even come up with an example. So some of you might have heard of the program called Landmark. It's a worldwide program, and it's all about really looking at your beliefs of how you look at the world. And the greatest thing I've learned in that is on day 3, the presenters, just kind of put this phrase out to the crowd, and they didn't explain what they meant, and they just wanted the crowd to debate and converse through it. And they said, life is empty and meaningless. Okay, discussion, right? And so everybody, we have all these different ideas, and, people want to say how negative that is and how that's not true and blah, 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 blah. But the real point was positive. And the positive point behind that is that nothing has any meaning inherently. There's no inherent meaning in my birth. My mom put a lot of meaning on my birth. My dad put a lot of meaning on my birth. Other people don't know me. They don't know anything about my birth, right? Diabetes, it's a thing. There's no inherent meaning in diabetes. And I explained this just on our crew call last week. I happened to be 215. My blood sugar was 215 on the call. And so I was like, so I'm making that mean something horrible, right? I'm making 215 mean something horrible. But somebody that's 350 all the time could make meaning 215 be awesome, right? 215 has no meaning. And so that's really, what you're speaking to is our canvas in life is blank. It is blank. And it doesn't matter if you are raised in a wonderful environment. It doesn't matter if you're raised in a horrible environment. The canvas is blank, and we put on the meaning to everything. We put on the meaning to everything. And so I love that. So Lorna said that apparently the term is unrealistic, or her term that she's heard is unrealistic positivity. And again, that's just somebody trying to stomp down on the positivity, right? Right. So Catherine, good topic for another day. Toxic positivity is suppressive positive, like denying what we, or worse, another person feels by too quickly donning the rose-colored glasses. Oh, okay. I could see that. Like the day you got diagnosed, you weren't smiling and saying, this is awesome.
Right. I guess it would be, not addressing the more negative side of things, just completely ignoring it. And there is there's something that's important about that too, but also being able to kind of rise above that, I think is just so important.
It's a fine line, right? Like they're just like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. You don't get to acceptance on step 1. Right. There's like denial and bargaining and then so I suppose it's a good discussion, but I think, once you're a year in diabetes, it's time to accept it.
Yeah.
So I love that your book addresses that. Tell me about the path. Like, how has your book reached? Have you tried to get it into doctor's offices? Have you gotten to camps, or like what kind of reach is your book? What's the life of your book?
Yeah. So I published it in May of 2020. So it's been almost 2 years now, coming up on it. And I've kind of just been doing, so I run my own virtual health coaching practice now on Instagram. So I do a lot of social media marketing with the book, and that's primarily where I get, a lot of reach and a lot of people reading it. But also I do have certain connections with different like hospitals and diabetes camps. So it's something that, I really love the in-person side of things. Like, I don't love being on social media, but it is a really powerful tool to reach people.
Yes.
But if I can go to diabetes networking events or diabetes camps and talking with kids and families, that's what really, really excites me. So
I'm so much the same. Yeah. But these Zoom virtual events, I think are, they're pretty good second.
Yeah, totally.
Because you have a live audience. Great. So speaking of, our challenges, what would you say are the most challenging parts for you of having had diabetes?
That is a good question.
Is right, because it's not all positive. Let's be real.
Yeah, that's right. Can't be toxic, right? Yeah, most challenging pieces. I'm so focused on the positive all the
I
time. It's
love
like a
this. I
tough one for
love
me.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I think as a young person dealing with it, it might have been more of the, I guess, like maybe the psychological side of things, thinking like, oh, maybe I am different than other kids and I have to do things differently. So kind of wrestling with that from an early age. And again, that never led to, like I said, a traditional like diabetes burnout. I did always have that positive lens, but just having those thoughts in the back of your head, like, oh, well, like, why do I have to do things differently from other kids? And why is this something that I have to deal with, But like you
Mhm.
said, when I was diagnosed, it just became part of life essentially, and it was just
Right.
the way that I did things. But just
Right.
there was that like probably subconscious side of me that was saying, oh, like why do I have to do these things
Yeah.
differently? Why am I different from other kids?
Now that's interesting that you use that phrase, because when I work with parents, that's one of the common things they say is like, well, I just want my kid to be like everybody else.
Mm,
And I always try to have them question that desire, right?
mhm.
So do you think it was, how was it for you to be different than everybody else? Like, what do you think are the ramifications of that?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there was a point in my like very young life where that was sort of like some kind of struggle for me. But obviously, like judging by the book and everything that I'm doing, I did something to turn that around. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I've seen it in a lot of kids that I work with, that it is just something really tough to wrestle with. But I kind of take it from a similar angle as you, where I say, everyone has something unique that they're going through, dealing with, um, something in their family, whether it's something they can see physically, whether it's something that's hidden like diabetes. And like, we're all unique, we're all different, and this just happens to be the thing that's a part of your life. And
Totally.
you know that's the way things are, so we can take it from a negative lens or take it through a positive lens.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm a huge supporter in like challenges make you stronger. Trust your path of life. There are no mistakes. This is for you, right? Trust the process. I've gotten a lot of life lessons from my aunt. She is a spiritual teacher and an author and radio, has a radio show, and she has bumper stickers that say trust the process and
Mhm.
let go, let God, right? And I remember when I first learned those phrases, I couldn't understand what they meant. I really didn't understand what they meant at all. And so I try to relate and understand that some people still don't get that, right? They're arm wrestling with life and like this is bad and this is good. And but I guess now I really see that, like, wait a minute, life is happening and I'm gonna do my best to embrace it, right? And that's, I mean, everybody gets curveballs. There's no way out. There's no way out of that. So it's really back to your initial point of like belief, and choosing your belief is where it all starts from, because then the thoughts and then the actions, right?
Mhm. Yep, definitely. And the the core part of my book is all of the chapters. Obviously, I talk a little bit about this idea of your beliefs kind of guiding things, but with each chapter, I've sort of outlined a trait or skill that you
Yes,
build living with
I
type 1.
love that.
So, at living with type 1, we gain all kinds of amazing skills. Like, we become amazing problem solvers. We learn to be extremely responsible, at a young age or whatever age you were diagnosed. We're very adaptable. We're really self-aware. So all these things that some people struggle with, we get a grasp on really quickly through living with this chronic illness that we have, and it's a pretty amazing thing.
Yeah, Nick's book is, it's really positive, obviously, but I love that was kind of a silly phrase to even say. But what I meant to say was I love how you organized it. So every chapter is, like you said, an adjective, and why we're responsible, why we're problem solvers, while we're more empathetic, right? So how many chapters are there? And can you name off all the all the traits right now?
I have the book right here, so I will
Okay.
name them for you, but I
Okay,
I
good.
can't name them by heart. So the other cool thing is I really wanted this to be something that also came from other people with type 1. So after every chapter, I interview one of the kids that I had worked with in the past,
Yeah, so
kind of
good.
ask them questions about how, this particular trait or skill, how they feel like type 1 has helped them to cultivate
So
or build
cool.
that. So that was really just the process itself
I
was so
love
fun
it.
talking
So
with
fun.
all these young people.
Yeah.
So the list goes toughness, empathy, hardworking, motivation, problem solving, independence, responsibility, composure, discipline, accuracy, maturity, organization, patience, gratitude, forethought, self-awareness, levity, pride, adaptability, and community. So quite a
20.
long list.
The 20?
20. Yep.
20. Yeah. See, that is awesome. That is awesome. I love it. Okay. Well, we have a question. Is there an audiobook?
Not at the moment, but that's something that is in the works.
Okay.
Great
Are
question.
you going to read it?
I would love to. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be your voice for sure, because your energy and your voice is very positive. It's always, audiobooks are one thing when you love the book, but then you also have to love the voice.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And then Lauren asked, is it suitable for kids who can read? I would say sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's certainly not anything but uplifting. So that's great.
Yep.
Okay. Well, why don't I always like to pause and take questions. So if you have a question, you can write it in the chat, or you can just do your raise hand as well. Let's see. So while you guys are thinking about questions, Nick, I want to hear more about your how you're helping type 1s virtually.
Yeah. So right now I am, like I said, running my own virtual health coaching practice. And I kind of like to call myself a root cause coach. So what I specialize in doing is helping people get a little bit deeper into their, what we call root cause issues, things like mold toxicity, parasites, some of these deeper things that aren't talked about in the conventional medicine world a lot. Because that's another thing that I've dealt with through my whole health journey a little more recently, is just some health issues that I don't want to say unrelated to diabetes, but I'm sure the diabetes played a role, but different things like adrenal burnout and thyroid issues and all kinds of things that I had dealt with that I've been essentially healing myself from, that I now help other people heal with. And I do work with a lot of people that have type 1, and that's kind of one of my favorite populations to work with, obviously, but I'm open to working with anyone with struggling with any kind of complex chronic illness.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
awesome.
So aside from that, I'm in school for massage and body work as well right now. So
Gotcha.
yeah,
You should
I like to
consider
stay
the
busy.
ND. You should consider the ND program. It's
I know.
incredible.
I have. There's so many different things that I'm so thrilled and interested by. I love Chinese medicine and naturopathic medicine. I mean, there's so many cool.
Even the
disciplines.
master's in nutrition program at my school was incredible. Like talk about using food as medicine. It was amazing.
So
absolutely
cool.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. I just had a question that went away. If you were able to sit down with a newly diagnosed person, what would you like to tell them?
I think, well, so actually I did write the book with in mind for someone who was newly diagnosed, to really start them off with that core belief concept of, okay, like this is going to be tough, but you're going to grow, and it's a challenge that's meant to be in your life, and you can have all these amazing things that can come from it. So really just that idea, like if I can either tell that to people or share the book with people, I feel like I'm doing my piece in the world of sharing my experience, my message.
That's awesome. Do you have any inclination as to why you got diabetes? I always love this question. I mean, it's a huge guess, right?
That is an interesting, yeah, I'm not sure. I do. So if we're talking the more genetic route, I do have a great grandmother on one side of my family who did have type 1, but that's the only diagnosis that we know of in my family. But from a more like spiritual perspective, I do think it's really part of my purpose in life is what I'm doing, helping other people with type 1 and writing the book. So everything, like you said, let go and let God. So everything is meant to be as it is,
Awesome. Oh, Doug asked if you could share your social media handles in the chat.
Sure.
That would be great. Anybody? Any other questions? Yes, Catherine.
First, Nick, thank you. It's like just reading the title of those chapters, like something in me shifted. It was like, yes, that's it. I mean, Dr. Jody gave us an exercise to write a message to our diabetes. Like, and I can't remember if you assigned this or mine just came out sort of like a yin yang, like, here's what I'm really grateful for, and here's the pain in the ass part. So at the beginning, we talked about, it sounds like your experience and Jody's and a lot of people's is that childhood diagnosis, and the chapter headings really speak to, and it's true for young people that I know who have learned to be responsible for their health from an early age. Those all sound right. And I would add one, or I wonder if you've seen a difference, or I will share another gift and ask you to reflect as you've worked with adult diagnosis people. Like I suspect, like on a spiritual or even physiological level, that stress in my life related to lack of boundaries and blah, 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 led to stress, led to shingles, led to viral, led to type 1, led to the autoimmune attack of type 1. And who knows? That's one theory. But the gift that I've gotten has been, I must establish boundaries. I must be an autonomous self, where I was always just melted into whatever would be socially acceptable. I would eat whatever was in. We've been doing a lot of talking about food for holidays. Like, I now have no problem bringing my own food or communicating about my needs. And that would have been unheard of 10 years ago. So I would love to have you reflect from your coaching business on that. There are gifts, there are those developmental gifts for a young person growing up in life. And then I think that particular one, I wonder if, I certainly feel it might be unique to an adult onset. I don't know, a theory.
Yeah, I think that's great.
An appendix.
Yeah, no, and I have a very similar experience with me going through some of my other health challenges more recently, to where I had a similar struggle where I was a big people pleaser. I wasn't very great at setting boundaries. And then I was sort of, when I was forced to completely slow my life down and change my lifestyle completely, that's when I truly learned how to set boundaries. And even another thing we talk about a lot with diabetes is kind of wanting to be in control and sort of being the control freak, because at a certain extent we have to be in control of our blood sugars, right? And that's another thing that I've learned that I'm still learning, is learning to let go at certain times and of certain situations, So I think there's maybe another book in the future for adult lessons, because there's a lot of very important ones too.
Who knew that diabetes would be a spiritual path?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Everything is. Aaron says, how do you let go when there are so many tasks related to managing blood sugar? For example, do you put everything on your calendar as far as ordering pump and CGM supplies, changing devices, backups, doctor appointments? And do you have time management ideas?
That's a good question. So with everything that you mentioned that is diabetes related, those are all things that I am very regimented, that I want to be in control of. But it's very easy for that to transfer over to other parts of life. So a lot of my, I guess, like the more spiritual practice of this and learning to let go has been in all those other areas of life, and not letting my sort of diabetes mind or diabetes mindset transfer into all those other parts of my life, if that makes sense.
Yes. Do you have time management ideas?
Time management ideas in regards to anything specifically, like around diabetes?
And do you want to
well, yeah. So I got it late, 54 on insulin. And so I've been on insulin for nearly 10 years now. I was never known as an organized person. However, one thing I did see right away that helped me, because I worked as a professional photographer way back in film and all this, and I learned about redundancy, that when you go out on a commercial shoot, I took one class from a Washington, D.C. White House photographer, and he said, you got to have 2 of everything, maybe 3. And that mindset has really saved me a couple of times. And I've traveled a lot, so I have that mindset when I travel. Just recently, I was so excited. I bought a mini, the new 13 mini, so I could fit it in my pocket and did not fall out. But I forgot to check whether it worked with the Dexcom, and Dexcom kind of trails. So I went, oh no, I freaked out for a few minutes. And I was on the phone with the Dexcom tech, who wasn't trained, to go, well, do you have your receiver? And I had bought the receiver and I had never used it, but it was current enough where I was able to go and get it going. But unfortunately now I have 3 devices. And I got the watch too. So I guess I have to wait for the watch, for the phone to work with the Dexcom before I can. I just retired the Apple II watch. So that's how it's helped me. But still, that was one of my main frustrations. They said I had type 2 at first, took 5 doctors. That's my story. And I was just so frustrated because I was already because I have so many interests and activities. So I put myself in overwhelm, and then also being married to someone who's a traveler, go-getter, and thinks that when he's here, I should be totally available. So he and actually through my brother told me that you talk about diabetes all the time. And I don't even think I do it as much as I used to. But at first I felt like, one, I like to educate people and shared my astonishment that this happened to me. Not why me, but wow, this could happen to you too at any age. And ironically, my sister-in-law is a diabetes educator, which didn't come in handy at all. She didn't talk about it after hours, which that would have helped some of us in our family, but I'm the only one that got the type 1. And I have had a lot of stress. So I think stress does play a big trigger role, I'm assuming, because I've always been pretty, good about diet and exercise. But the time management thing has been a challenge for me. But again, I'm thankful that I had that photography experience, and even with the numbers, just the, not high mathematics, but just, and I never liked numbers either. And I was thinking, this is, at first I thought, this also feels like a curse, because it's forcing me to do some, calculations too, and planning ahead, so in that way it has really helped me. And with kids, I can see where it would benefit kids just from the get-go.
Anne, but your question is time management ideas. How can you better manage your time when it comes to ordering supplies and things? Or, time management, can you be more specific?
Well, I just was curious what Nick's answer would be. I do, put things on the calendar and things. Well, yeah, when you're on the go and you don't have, every day can be different. It makes it more challenging. And the more, if you don't let diabetes hold you back, where, as far as, the insulin, making sure, you have your supplies and all, which it's just the juggling of all the different things, if I've got something to go to, is my pod going to expire? Well, I get the 4-hour notice. But if I get so involved in an activity where I kind of lose track of time, that I've been in that situation where, it's like you got to go home and let the dog out, which isn't the case because I have a doggy door, but, oh, I got to go home because my insulin is going out, or I can't eat that because I forgot my pump, so just that awareness, like you said, Nick, the awareness, it teaches you have to be cognizant of where you are. And I got in trouble when I went to Alaska and did photography on a boat in 2019. And I actually had an extremely low blood sugar sitting in a restaurant, came in, and I had already gotten into that. I've been doing photography on the boat, and I was just kind of eating a salad, during the day, and a couple sugary things, but I kind of just forgot. I got so much engrossed in my activity. And when we got off the boat, we went to the restaurant, and I needed somebody to say, hey, have you looked at your, I had the CGM on, but I sat there and what I found is when I've gotten low, that sometimes if I don't know why the alarm didn't go off. I didn't hear it, that's what it was. I didn't hear it. So, I'm asking for bread, and I didn't even think juice. And then a doctor was sitting at the next table, and she asked me something. I told her I'm having a low blood sugar, and she goes, get some juice for her. Anyway,
So I think, Nick, I'll let you answer, but I think you might have already answered your own question, Anne, if
I
you
know.
heard yourself.
But you did bring up a great point about mentioning the self-awareness that you gain, but also that whole story really is a big lesson in learning adaptability. Like all these little situations, we become so adaptable. And for me, at least, diabetes is it's so amazingly complex, and it is time consuming, and there is a lot that you have to think about and remember. So for me, I find that, we live in a world that is so fast paced and go mentality. And, it's like the fastest moving century that we've ever seen with technology and everything. And the world is moving so fast. And when your diabetes is moving so fast, that I find I really have to make an effort to simplify other parts of my life and even simplify my diabetes. Like I was on a pump for most of my life. And as I got older, I realized, I just want something simpler, something that I don't have to think as much about. So I have been using MDIs now for the last 2 or 3 years, and I just have my receiver. I don't have my, I used to have it on my phone, but that was even sometimes too much to be looking at my screen all day. So just kind of working to simplify other parts of my life and parts of my diabetes is something that has really helped me.
MBI, is that the long-term shot?
That just means multiple daily injections.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Nick, I rolled the same. That's all I got.
Yeah.
I don't want it on my phone either. Like,
Yep. Me too.
I try to disconnect from my phone as much as possible.
Mhm.
So Anne, just to tag on to what Nick has said, there's a level of responsibility and awareness that is essential. And the more awareness and responsibility we take for all aspects of our life, the better our life flows. The let go part comes when you do the best you can, right? It's like you do the best you can and you still hit 200. You do the best you can and you forgot your supplies, right? You do the best you can because you allow yourself to be human. And if our grip is like this and if we try to get everything too tightly, perfect and in the flow, that is when we need to let go, right? There's what happens in life, and then there's how we respond to it. So Nick is still recommending to, take responsibility and have awareness for what's happening in life. But this next level of judgment and attitude, and are we going to go with the flow, or are we going to resist the flow, right? Are we going to accept what is, or are we going to, fight what is? So it's just kind of like I say in the crew, we need education, right? And then we also need to use critical thinking, and we need to be adaptable, right? But that both levels are necessary. You need that base level of responsibility and reliability. And then there's the attitude part of going with the flow. And that's where the let go is. The let go is not in the whole process, right? You don't just let it all go. You just doesn't work. But I do, to answer your question specifically, I definitely calendar some things. Like my Dexcom supplies come every 3 months, but I have to initiate that 3-month, right? So, but my transmitter, right, it gives you a 2-week warning. It says, transmitter. So as soon as I get that 2-week warning, I'm like, okay, contact Dexcom, get that next shipment going. You have to figure out what are the triggers that you need so you don't forget. It's funny that you are having this topic though. I literally had a dream just last night that I was out and about and I didn't have any diabetes supplies with me. And I was like, I totally forgot. What just happened? And I did. I just had a dream and I was driving to a restaurant and I was already 45 minutes to the restaurant because it was an hour away. And I realized I didn't have my insulin. And so I pulled over at a pharmacy. This is how specific my dream was. And I tested my blood sugar because if I was going to be 80, I was going to go to the restaurant and eat a low carb dinner, but I was 220. So I had to go 45 minutes back home, get my insulin, drive back to the restaurant. That was my dream last night. I just had that. That's so funny. That's never really happened to me though. I pretty much, I think about it. And a comment that somebody put on my Facebook page recently was, she goes, "Oh, I didn't realize you thought about it all day long." And some people can think of that as a negative. And I think of it as a positive because it's kind of like the analogy of a garden. If you just pull a few weeds every day, it's not going to ever become massively overgrown, right? But if you just ignore it, and then you have weeds everywhere, right? So you actually are in better flow when you just kind of check in. Like I check in, I'm 120. Oh, I check in, I'm 150. Oh, wait a minute, I 30 points. Okay, well, let's do a correction or let's go on a walk. Instead of don't look. And now I'm 300. Right now we're in more of a conundrum, right? So let's see. Gaelic says, me too, receiver and shots. I also write everything down so I don't have to hold it in my mind. Yeah, life is really about, or living with diabetes is really about figuring out what allows you to be at peace with it, right? That's the goal, I think. And Nick, you were talking about control, right? Control. And I say that word too. The word that I really like is navigate.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
We're navigating, because controlling sounds like 1 + 1 is always equal 2. And in diabetes, 1 + 1 does not always equal 2, right? You can't always dose 15 minutes before you eat and just give yourself 1 for 10 grams of carb, right? There's so much more than that. And so we're navigating this. We're dancing with diabetes, right? We're not controlling diabetes. We're dancing with diabetes. There's another good book named Dancing with Diabetes.
That's great. I'm going to write that down.
People are always like, Jody, when are you going to write your next book? I'm like, how about Nick? How about you write the next book?
I would love to.
I'm too much of an extrovert. Like, writing is hard for me. Like, I just have to be behind my computer by myself writing. Oh,
right.
yeah.
See, I just hate being behind the screen. I love the writing part. If I could pull out a typewriter or something, I'd be all for it.
Oh, how funny. That's so funny. Yeah. And then one other comment I wrote down that I wanted to finish on, and I think I made this point, but when we were talking earlier about how parents say they want their kids to be like everybody else, and you realize that you had this thing that wasn't like everybody else, is I really see that as a strength. Like, who wants to be like everybody else?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. You have a unique story, something that makes things interesting,
Yeah. And you learn to honor yourself, right? You learn to honor who you are, right? The independent, we're all independent beings, it's so middle school to want to fit in with everybody else. Okay, so Glenn, do you have a question? Where did Glenn go? Let's see.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise you, would it, Jody?
Okay, what's that, Glenn?
But it wouldn't surprise you if I have a comment, would it?
Oh gosh, I'm shocked. Glenn has a question and a comment. Okay, all you, Glenn.
Backstory: I'm an LDA. Late to the. Yeah, I'm a lot. I was a type 2 and with denial, because I heard 5 doctors told the predecessor here that, hey, you're type 2, and that was baloney. So anyway, professionally, I was a pilot, and you had to plan everything in advance. Like Jody, you just flew to Hawaii, right?
Notice the turtleneck. I'm no
Yeah.
longer in Hawaii. I was in Hawaii.
Well, what if you're in the middle of the Pacific out there and the pilot says, "Oh gosh, I forgot the compass. What are we going to do?" Okay, well now that you're in a pickle then, but here's the point. I always had a nav bag I took with me, and I took 2 or 3 spares with me at all times. So that meant I had to order in advance. So whatever these diabetic supplies are, don't wait till the horse is out the barn, out the gate, order it in advance and put it on the shelf and let it collect a little dust except for the expiration date. And you plan your flight and you fly your plan, and that's the way you manage this type 1 diabetes. And that's what I got to say about that. Be proactive, don't be reactive.
All right. Well, that's good.
I love that.
That's all I got to say about it. Thanks for your time, and vote for me. How about that? Okay. Thank you for listening and growing.
I vote for Glenn.
Bye.
Here's
Okay.
one for the pilot. Is it true that planes always take off against the wind?
Yeah.
And then turn?
Henry Ford says that. Henry Ford's the one that came out with that initial quote. Yes. Remember, you always take off in the wind. And as a pilot, you always want to have the same number of landings as you have takeoffs. So thank you for your question.
Okay, let's see. We've got a lot of comments over here. I also think that the learning to be supportable is a useful lesson. Supportable, like the doctor who happened to be at the table next to Anne. Many of us are doggedly independent. Yes.
That's a good, I like the word coachable too.
Yes, exactly. Or at least a balance in whatever direction, independence and supportable. You know, that's so great, Catherine, that you just said that. You guys know I'm very transparent with my life. I'm actually reading a book about love and relationships. And it talks about how there are 5 rights that every child ideally experiences before even the age of 3 that really give us the idea of what it's like to be in a loving relationship. And one of those rights is the right to separate and belong. Like as children, we need to be able to know we can have our parents there, but that we can kind of venture out. And it's exactly the same thing in life. Like in our communities, in our relationships, in our diabetes care, there is a level of, I got this, and now I got to let it go. Or I need help and support, and I've got this on my own. And, you know, that's exactly what we're doing here in the crew is all of you guys, you know, my goal is that I'm teaching you all to fish, right? I don't want to keep telling you what to do and then have you go to your endo and have them tell you what to do and then have the CDE tell you what to do. It's like, no, we can't keep being told you got to understand how to do it. And then we touch in and we listen to Nick and we come to the crew and we get our support, but then we separate and we're like, I got this, right? It's a dance that we all have to do in life. We all need support and we all need community and we all need to thrive. We don't need support and community. I mean, you can not have it and then suffer, but to thrive, I believe support, community, motivation, inspiration is key, but then not too much of anxiety, like I can't let go and do it myself. There's that separate and belong. Doug says, I think it's easier to not want to fit in as you get emotionally more mature, but it's harder when you're younger. Yeah, that's a really good point. That is a good point. Lorna says, I think it's easier for very young children and adults, but really difficult for older children and teenagers. Yeah, that's very true. That is true. And, you know, each person is still unique, right? As a teenager. So there's ways to still fit in, even though you have this thing. All right. Well, Nick, any last questions before we wrap up? Cool. Nick, closing comments?
Closing comments. Nothing comes to mind, but thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast.
Well, thank you everybody for coming to practice. As I always like to say, we come and tune our skills in and, you know, get that boost of motivation and community, which is so important. Don says, thank you, Nick. Yes, absolutely. Nick, I think we should have a chat and we should collaborate because,
I'd love
we're
to.
so on the same page. And so I'd love to hear more about the vision of, where you want to go. And yeah, cool. So if
For
you
sure, I'd love
you
to.
want to stay on
And-
for a few minutes.
Yeah, and my book is available on Amazon, like you guys saw a minute ago.
Yeah.
But you can also find it on my website, which I'll link my social media links and my website in the chat if you guys want to
Yeah.
get in
go ahead.
contact.
Let's see. Let me pull up. Is your website just your name? No.
It's blueprintwellnessllc.com.
Okay. Blueprint. Okay.
And I like your comment. I look of Scandinavian heritage. Slovak and Polish, those are the two big ones. So close.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming and listening to Nick. Nick, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your book and sharing your
Thank you.
positivity and inspiration. And I know your work is greatly needed in the world. And let me just turn my view back to gallery view. I think the positive attitude when it comes to type 1 is it's sometimes more important than how to set your basal rate.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Even though I'm very passionate about teaching people how to set their basal rate and all that good stuff. I get very medical, right, with what I want, but I also have let's be positive and let's be supportive. It's part of good care. We can't, I think actually you really need both. You really need both. You need the education, the support, the motivation. And that's what we did here today in this hour. And that's what I try to do with all you guys in the crew. So thank you once again, Nick. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
happy
having me.
holidays. All
Thank
right.
you.
Happy